On the wild open ocean, a different kind of ruler emerged, and they often sailed solo. We are talking about pirate captains, masters of their own destiny, who carved out empires of fear and fortune without a husband or wife whispering advice in their ear or sharing their throne. Did you know one legendary pirate, Bartholomew Roberts, is credited with capturing over 400 ships in just a few short years, all while living by his own strict code that did not mention any need for a spouse? Or that a wealthy landowner, Major Stede Bonnet, deliberately abandoned a comfortable married life in Barbados, trading it all for the thrill of rebellion on the high seas in 1717. And what about the women like Anne Bonny and Mary Read who disguised themselves, or simply did not care for convention fighting and leading with a ferocity that needed no spousal endorsement to be recognized? These 7 individuals, and many more like them, proved that to command a fleet, to instill terror in merchant crews across vast oceans, and to become legends whispered across continents, you did not need a ring on your finger or a partner by your side in the traditional sense. Their stories are a testament to raw ambition, ruthless skill, and an independence that defined their reign over their turbulent domains. Get ready to meet the pirate captains who showed the world that the only partner they truly needed was the sea itself, and perhaps a loyal crew ready to follow them into legend without any societal pressure for a +1. Number 7. Stede Bonnet, the gentleman pirate who ghosted his marriage for a life of crime. Imagine this. You are a gentleman of means, living on a plantation in Barbados around the year 1717. You have land, you have education, you even hold the rank of major in the local militia. And you are married? Sounds pretty comfortable, right, for most, perhaps. Not for Major Stede Bonnet. Something about this settled life, this conventional existence with a wife by his side, must have chafed him something fierce. Because one day, Stede Bonnet did something truly astonishing. He decided to become a pirate. Now, this was not your typical down-on-his-luck sailor turning to piracy out of desperation. Bonnet was wealthy. Instead of stealing a ship, he actually bought one. He named his 10-gun sloop Revenge. He then hired a crew of about 70 men, paying them wages from his own pocket, at least initially. Why would a married man of property and standing throw it all away for such a dangerous and disreputable life? History does not give us a definitive, signed confession. Some records from the time suggest issues in his marriage with contemporaries, mentioning discomforts he found in a married state, or difficulties with his wife. It seems the call of the sea, or perhaps the call to escape his domestic life, was stronger than any vows he might have made. He left his wife and his old life behind completely. He did not need her permission, nor did he seem to seek her companionship on his new wild venture. His start in piracy was, to put it mildly, a bit wobbly. Unlike seasoned sailors who worked their way up, Bonnet knew very little about ships or the sea. He was a landowner, not a mariner. His crew, likely sensing his inexperience, were not always the most respectful. Imagine their surprise. A group of hardened seamen being led by a man who was probably still learning port from starboard. Despite his greenness, Bonnet set sail along the American coast, from the Carolinas to New York. He managed to capture several vessels, plundering their goods. Perhaps the initial thrill of this new independent life was everything he had hoped for after leaving his spouse and responsibilities in Barbados. However, his lack of nautical knowledge soon caught up with him. After a particularly rough encounter with a Spanish man of war, his ship the Revenge was heavily damaged, and Bonnet himself was wounded. It was around this time, in the late summer or autumn of 1717, near the coast of the Carolinas, that he had a fateful meeting with one of the most infamous pirates of all, Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. Seeing Bonnet's inexperience and his wounded state, Blackbeard made an offer, or perhaps it was more of a gentle takeover. Blackbeard invited Bonnet to come aboard his own ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. Blackbeard told Bonnet that with his injuries he should rest and recover. Meanwhile, Blackbeard would send one of his own lieutenants to command Bonnet's ship, the Revenge. Stede Bonnet became, for a time, a guest, or perhaps a well-treated prisoner aboard Blackbeard's vessel. He was still a captain in name, but not really in command of his own ship or destiny. He walked the deck in his fine clothes, a gentleman among ruffians, but the power clearly lay with Teach. This period showed that while he had managed to leave one domestic arrangement, he had, in a way, fallen into another dependent situation, albeit one without marital ties. Blackbeard eventually double-crossed Bonnet, as pirates often did, taking the best of the plunder and marooning some of Bonnet's crew. Bonnet, however, was surprisingly resilient, or perhaps just incredibly stubborn in his new chosen path. He managed to regain command of the Revenge, or what was left of it, and sought a pardon from the governor of North Carolina in 1718. For a brief time, he even worked as a privateer under the governor's commission, hunting other pirates. This was a strange interlude. The man who abandoned his structured life for lawlessness was now temporarily an agent of the law. Call of piracy, or maybe the lack of other viable options for a man now thoroughly notorious, pulled him back. He returned to his old ways, but this time, perhaps aware of his reputation, he operated under the alias Captain Thomas and renamed his ship the Royal James. He did not, it seems, consider returning to his wife in Barbados. That chapter was firmly closed. His life was now solely dedicated to this independent, albeit criminal, enterprise. His renewed career as a solo pirate captain was short-lived. In August 1718, he was operating in the Cape Fear River area in North Carolina. His presence did not go unnoticed. Colonel William Rhett, a wealthy planter and militia officer from South Carolina, much like Bonnet had once been, was dispatched to hunt him down. After a fierce battle that lasted several hours on September 27, 1718, Bonnet and his crew were captured. The gentleman pirate, who had sought freedom from his old life, found himself in chains. Stede Bonnet was taken to Charleston, South Carolina, to stand trial. His trial was a sensation. Here was a man of education and former social standing, now accused of heinous crimes on the high seas. He pleaded not guilty, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Many of his former crew testified against him. Some accounts suggest he wrote a letter begging for clemency, perhaps highlighting the desperation of a man who had gambled everything on a life of independence and lost. There was no wife present to plead his case. No family connections from his old life in Barbados seemed to intervene. He stood alone, judged for the path he had chosen after abandoning his previous commitments. On December 10, 1718, Major Stede Bonnet was hanged at White Point Garden in Charleston. He was about 30 years old. His foray into piracy lasted little more than a year and a half. He never became a hugely successful pirate in terms of riches or command longevity. Yet, his story is one of the most peculiar in pirate lore. A man who deliberately chose piracy, not out of need, but seemingly out of a desire to escape a conventional, married life. He proved that dissatisfaction with a spousal relationship could be a powerful, if unusual, motivator for a life of maritime crime, and that once embarked upon such a life was lived entirely outside the norms of settled, partnered society. His tale is a stark example of someone who did not need a spouse to rule the seas, primarily because he chose to leave one behind to do so. Number 6. Edward Lowe, the pirate, whose brutality was legendary, and whose early life held a clue. Edward Lowe, sometimes known as Ned Lowe, carved a name for himself in the early 1720s as one of the most ferocious and sadistic pirates of the golden age of piracy. His reign of terror though relatively brief, lasting about 3 years, from roughly 1721 to 1724, was so packed with violence and cruelty that his reputation for barbarity became infamous. But what drove this man to such extremes? While the life of a pirate was inherently violent, Low took it to another level, and his personal history, particularly concerning his marital status just before his full-blown piracy, offers a somber insight. Born in Westminster, London around 1690, Low's early life was reportedly one of poverty and petty crime. He was described as illiterate and prone to dishonesty from a young age. He eventually made his way to Boston, Massachusetts as a young man. It was in Boston, around 1714, that he met and married Eliza Marble. Sources suggest that they had 2 children, a son who died in infancy and a daughter named Elizabeth, born a few years later. Here is a crucial point. Eliza, his wife, reportedly died in childbirth when their daughter was born, sometime around late 1719 or early 1720. This personal tragedy seems to have occurred just before Edward Low fully descended into his notorious piratical career. Imagine the impact of such a loss. While we cannot definitively say this was the sole trigger for his subsequent savagery, many historical accounts note this event. After his wife's death, Low left his young daughter in the care of others and went to sea, initially working as a rigger and then on a sloop bound for Honduras. It was on this voyage, in late 1721, that his path turned irrevocably towards piracy. He and a dozen other disgruntled crewmen mutinied, seized a small vessel, and declared themselves pirates. Low was elected captain. From this point on, his career was marked by a chilling lack of any spousal influence or domestic anchor. His wife was gone, and he showed no inclination to form any new such attachment. His focus became entirely on plunder, and disturbingly, on inflicting pain. Low's early piratical actions quickly established his brutal methods. He would often order the cutting off of ears, noses, or lips of his captives if they resisted, or if he suspected them of hiding valuables. One of his early flag designs reportedly depicted a red skeleton on a black background, a fearsome symbol of his deadly intent. He cruised the shipping lanes of the Caribbean, the Azores, and the coast of North America, leaving a trail of looted ships and traumatized survivors. The number of vessels he captured is estimated to be over 100 in his short career. One particularly notorious incident occurred in 1722. After capturing a Virginia galley, Low was enraged to find that most of the valuable cargo had been thrown overboard by the captain to prevent it from falling into pirate hands. Low had the captain's lips sliced off, broiled them, and then forced the unfortunate man to eat them before murdering him and most of his crew. Such acts were not just about securing loot. They were about instilling terror, making his name synonymous with horror, so that future victims would surrender without a fight. He operated without any moderating influence that a partner might sometimes provide. Or perhaps the absence of his wife fueled a deeper rage against the world. His cruelty was not random. It was a calculated tool, but it also seemed to possess a pathological edge. There are numerous accounts of him burning ships with crews still aboard, or torturing captains in inventive and horrifying ways. For instance, he once reportedly tied a ship's cook to the mainmast and set fire to him because he was a greasy fellow who would fry well. In another instance, when a Portuguese captain threw a bag of gold into the sea, rather than let Low have it, Low had the captain cut to pieces. He was a man ruling his domain of the sea through absolute fear, accountable to no one, certainly not a spouse. His crew, many of whom were equally hardened, followed him perhaps out of fear or because his methods, however brutal, brought them success and plunder. Low's command style was effective in maintaining his authority over his own ruthless men. He changed ships several times, often upgrading to larger, more powerful vessels taken from his victims. commanded flotillas of several pirate ships, at times extending his reach and his terrifying reputation. He was known to show no mercy, especially to those from New England, perhaps harboring some resentment from his time in Boston. His actions made him one of the most hunted pirates of his era. The authorities and naval patrols were desperate to put an end to his reign. The end of Edward Lowe's career is shrouded in some mystery, much like his internal motivations. There are several conflicting accounts of his fate after 1724. One story suggests his own crew mutinied against him due to his excessive cruelty, setting him adrift in a small boat, where he was later found by the French and hanged in Martinique in 1725. Another version claims he made his way to Brazil and died there. A third suggests he simply disappeared, his fate unknown. Whatever the truth, his brutal impact was undeniable. He had ruled his stretch of the seas as a solitary, vengeful figure. The loss of his wife may have been a turning point, stripping away a layer of his humanity and leaving him to forge a path of terror, utterly independent of any spousal bond, proving that such a bond was not necessary for him to become one of the most feared pirate captains in history. His brief, violent career demonstrated a chilling form of leadership, unconstrained by any domestic partnership. Number 5. Charles Vane, the unbending pirate who said no thanks to a pardon and sailed his own way. Charles Vane was a pirate who truly embodied the spirit of rebellion and a stubborn refusal to bow to authority, especially when it came to the King's Pardon of 1718. Active primarily from 1716 to 1720, Vane operated in the waters around the Bahamas and the American colonies. While many pirates of his time had complex reasons for their life of crime, Vane seemed to relish the defiance it represented. His marital status is not a prominent feature of his story. He appears in historical records as a figure unencumbered by a spouse, allowing him to make bold, independent decisions that defined his career. Vane first appears in historical records as one of the pirates operating under Captain Henry Jennings during Jennings' attack on the Spanish salvage camp for the 1715 treasure fleet shipwreck off the coast of Florida. This was a significant event that enriched many pirates and boosted Nassau on New Providence Island in the Bahamas as a pirate haven. Vane quickly rose to command his own ship, a brigantine. He was known for his audacity and his skills as a navigator and commander, though he was also criticized by some of his contemporaries and later by his own crew for his methods. The defining moment for Charles Vane, and one that highlights his independent spirit, came in 1718. King George I of Great Britain offered a pardon to all pirates who surrendered by a certain deadline. This was a major turning point in the golden age of piracy. Many pirate captains, including some very famous ones, decided to accept the pardon, hoping for a chance to return to a lawful life. Woodes Rogers, a former privateer, was appointed governor of the Bahamas and arrived in Nassau in July 1718, with the pardon and a naval force to suppress piracy. When Rogers arrived, Nassau was the quintessential pirate republic. Vane was one of the leading figures among the pirates who rejected the pardon. He had no interest in giving up his freedom or his lucrative plundering. As Rogers' fleet sailed into Nassau Harbor, Vane made a dramatic statement of his defiance. He set his own flagship on fire and sent it sailing towards Rogers' ships, hoping to cause chaos and damage. While the fire ship did not do significant harm to the naval vessels, it was a clear message: Charles Vane would not submit. Under the cover of the confusion, Vane and his crew, numbering about 90 men, slipped out of the harbor in a smaller sloop, firing a cannon at the governor's ship as they passed, shouting their intentions to continue their piratical ways. This bold act was carried out without any record of him needing to consult a spouse or consider family ties. His commitment was to his own vision of a pirate's life. Free from Nassau, Vane continued his piratical activities with renewed vigor. He captured several ships and became notorious for his cruelty towards those who resisted. However, his captaincy style was not universally popular even among his own men. He was accused of being overly cautious at times when it came to valuable plunder, yet excessively harsh with his crew. He also had a habit of keeping a larger share of the loot for himself and his quartermaster, Jack Rackham, also known as Calico Jack, which was against the usual democratic nature of pirate articles. One particular incident sealed his fate as captain of his crew. In late 1718, Vane's flotilla encountered a large French warship. Vane, perhaps uncharacteristically, decided against attacking the heavily armed vessel, ordering a retreat. Many of his crew, led by the more flamboyant Calico Jack Rackham, saw this as an act of cowardice. They argued that the French ship would have yielded rich plunder. Shortly after, in November 1718, the crew held a vote, a common practice on pirate ships, to depose an unpopular captain. Charles Vane was voted out of command. He was branded a coward, and Calico Jack Rackham was elected as the new captain of their main ship. Vane was not left entirely destitute. He and about 15 loyal followers were given a small sloop, and they parted ways with Rackham. Even in this reduced state, Vane's defiant spirit did not wane. He continued his piracy, capturing a few small ships in the West Indies. He was a man who, even when abandoned by the majority of his crew, seemed determined to live by his own rules, without a partner to influence his choices or offer comfort in his reduced circumstances. His independent piratical ventures, after being deposed, were, however, ill-fated. In February 1719, Vane's sloop was caught in a powerful hurricane in the Bay of Honduras and was wrecked. Most of his crew drowned. Vane himself survived, washed ashore on a small, uninhabited island. He was marooned for several weeks, kept alive by local fishermen. Eventually, he was rescued by a passing ship. Unfortunately for Vane, the captain of this ship, Holford, was an old acquaintance who recognized him. Captain Holford was also on his way to Jamaica and knew that Vane was a wanted man. Initially, Holford was reluctant to turn him in, perhaps due to some past association. But another captain who knew Vane, a former buccaneer named Captain Knott, convinced Holford that Vane was too dangerous to be left at large. Charles Vane was taken to Port Royal, Jamaica, which was then under tight British naval control. He was imprisoned, and after a trial, found guilty of piracy. There were no pleas for mercy from a wife, no family to speak for him. He had chosen a path of solitary defiance, and he faced its consequences alone. Charles Vane was hanged at Gallows Point in Port Royal on March 29, 1721. His body was then gibbeted, hung in chains at Gun Cay, as a warning to other pirates. His career showed that, while a defiant, independent spirit could make for a notorious pirate, it did not always guarantee long-term success or the loyalty of his crew. He ruled his own destiny, without a spouse, right up to his unceremonious end. Number 4. Anne Bonny. She left her husband, found her crew, and fought like any man. Anne Bonny is one of the most famous female pirates in history, a figure whose life was marked by fiery independence and a complete disregard for the conventions of her time, especially those concerning marriage and a woman's role. Born Anne Cormac in County Cork, Ireland, around 1697 or 1700, her early life was already unconventional. She was the illegitimate daughter of a lawyer, William Cormac, and his maidservant. Her father eventually left Ireland with Anne, disguised as a boy for a time, and settled in Charlestown, Carolina. There, he became a successful merchant and plantation owner. Anne grew into a young woman known for her striking red hair and a notoriously fierce temper. Stories, though perhaps embellished, tell of her stabbing a servant girl with a knife when she was just 13, and of her beating a young man who made unwanted advances. It was clear she was not one to be trifled with. Her father had plans for her to marry into a good family, but Anne had her own ideas. Around 1718, she fell for a poor sailor and small-time pirate named James Bonnet. Against her father's wishes, she married him. This act of defiance led to her being disowned by her father. Anne did not seem to care. She had made her choice. She and James Bonnet then moved to Nassau in the Bahamas, a notorious haven for pirates. However, her marriage to James Bonnet did not last long. Nassau was a place of freedom and opportunity, especially for someone with Anne's rebellious spirit. James Bonnet eventually became an informant for Governor Woodes Rogers, a move that likely disgusted Anne, who was increasingly drawn to the genuine pirates of the island. It was in a Nassau tavern that she met John Rackham, known as Calico Jack, a pirate captain known more for his flamboyant dress and iconic Jolly Roger flag, a skull with crossed swords, than for his fearsome reputation. Anne was captivated by Rackham and his lifestyle. She soon left James Bonnet and eloped with Calico Jack, becoming part of his pirate crew, sailing aboard his ship, the Ranger. This decision was a clear statement. She was not going to be defined or constrained by a conventional spousal role. She sought adventure and equality, or at least the pirate version of it, on her own terms. Life aboard a pirate ship was harsh and overwhelmingly male. Anne Bonnet, however, quickly proved she was as capable and courageous as any man. She dressed in men's clothes during combat, though she did not generally hide her gender. At other times among the crew, she was skilled with a pistol and a cutlass and participated fully in the crew's piratical activities, including fierce battles. Eyewitness accounts from captured sailors later described her as one of the most formidable fighters on Rackham's ship. She was not merely a captain's consort, she was an active combatant, a pirate in her own right. Her relationship with Rackham was a partnership of outlaws, not a traditional marriage. She needed no spousal sanction to wield her weapons or claim her share of the plunder. It was on Rackham's ship that Anne Bonnet met Mary Read, another woman who had disguised herself as a man to live a life of adventure. Initially, Anne was reportedly attracted to Mary, believing her to be a handsome young man. When Anne revealed she was a woman, Mary, in turn, revealed her own gender. The two women became close friends and formidable fighting partners, a unique duo in the annals of piracy. Their presence on the ship was unusual, as women were generally considered bad luck on board. However, their fighting prowess and fierce loyalty to the crew earned them their place. Rackham's crew, with Anne and Mary among its most active members, had some success plundering smaller vessels in the Caribbean, particularly around Jamaica and Cuba during 1720. They were not as successful or as feared as pirates like Blackbeard or Bartholomew Roberts, but they certainly made a name for themselves, partly due to the novelty of having two fighting women in their ranks. Anne Bonnet's independence was total. She had abandoned one husband, taken up with another pirate captain outside of marriage, and carved out a role for herself based on her own abilities and courage. The end of their piratical spree came in October 1720. Captain Jonathan Barnett, a privateer commissioned by the governor of Jamaica, caught up with Rackham's sloop, the William, at Negro Point, Jamaica. Most of Rackham's male crew were reportedly drunk and hiding below deck when Barnett attacked. However, Anne Bonnet and Mary Read, along with perhaps one other man, fought furiously on deck, trying to fend off the attackers. They were said to have been enraged by the cowardice of their male crewmates, with Anne reportedly firing into the hold and shouting at them to come up and fight like men. Despite their bravery, they were overwhelmed and captured. The entire crew was taken to Spanish Town, Jamaica, for trial in November 1720. Rackham and the male pirates were quickly found guilty and sentenced to hang. Anne Bonny was allowed to see Rackham one last time before his execution. Her reported last words to him were scathing. "Had you fought like a man, you need not have been hanged like a dog." This statement perfectly encapsulates her independent spirit and her disdain for weakness, regardless of her personal relationship with him. Anne Bonny and Mary Read were also tried and found guilty of piracy. However, when asked if they had anything to say before sentencing, they both pleaded their bellies, announcing they were pregnant. This was a common legal tactic, as English law at the time forbade the execution of a pregnant woman. Their executions were stayed until they gave birth. Mary Read died in prison a few months later, possibly from fever related to childbirth or another illness. The fate of Anne Bonny is a mystery. There is no official record of her execution or her death in prison. Some stories suggest her wealthy father may have used his influence or money to secure her release. Other tales claim she returned to Charlestown remarried, had children, and lived a long, respectable life, dying in 1782. Another version has her moving to Louisiana and raising a family. Whatever her ultimate fate, Anne Bonny's story is a powerful example of a woman who rejected traditional spousal roles, embraced a life of danger and freedom on her own terms, and proved that a woman could be as fierce and independent a pirate as any man, without needing a husband to validate her existence or her capabilities on the high seas. Number 3. Mary Read. From disguised soldier to fearsome pirate, she needed no man to define her. Mary Read's life story is one of the most extraordinary tales from the golden age of piracy, a testament to a woman who defied every gender norm of the 18th century to forge her own path, a path that eventually led her to fight alongside Anne Bonny as a fearsome pirate. Her journey was one of continuous adaptation and fierce independence, rarely relying on or being defined by a marital relationship in the pursuit of her chosen life. Born in England, likely in the late 17th century, around 1685 or 1690, Mary's early life was shaped by deception and necessity. Her mother had an older, legitimate son who died. Shortly after, Mary was born out of wedlock. To continue receiving financial support from her deceased son's paternal grandmother, Mary's mother disguised young Mary as her dead son, passing her off as a boy. This disguise became a defining feature of Mary's early life. She grew up accustomed to male attire and behavior. As a young teenager, still presenting as a boy, Mary Read found work as a footboy to a French lady. However, finding this life dull, she ran away and enlisted in the British Army. She served as a soldier in Flanders during the War of the Spanish Succession, fighting bravely in several campaigns. Even among soldiers, she maintained her male disguise successfully for some time. It was during her military service that she fell in love with a Flemish soldier. She eventually revealed her true gender to him, and they married. For a brief period, Mary lived a more conventional life. She and her husband left the army and used their combined funds to open an inn near Breda Castle in the Netherlands called De Drie Hoedgers, or the Three Horseshoes. This interlude of married life was, however, to be short-lived. Her husband died young, possibly from illness. Left a widow and with her business failing, Mary Read once again donned male clothing and sought a new path. She enlisted as a soldier in Holland for a time, but peace broke out and she found herself without prospects. She then decided to try her luck at sea, still disguised as a man, and boarded a ship bound for the West Indies. This decision would set her on the course to piracy. The ship she was on was captured by English pirates. As a strong, able-bodied young man, she was offered, or perhaps pressured into, joining the pirate crew. She accepted, seeing little alternative. While some accounts say she was initially reluctant, she soon adapted to the pirate life. She served on several pirate vessels, maintaining her male persona, her skill in combat likely earning her respect among the crews. It was in 1720 that her path crossed with Calico, Jack, Rackham, Anne Bonny, and their crew. Mary, still known as Mark Ridd, was part of a crew on a Dutch privateering ship that mutinied and turned pirate. This group later joined forces with Rackham. It was aboard Rackham's ship, the William, that Anne Bonny, also on board, and openly female at least to the crew, reportedly took an interest in the handsome young sailor, Mark Reed. When Anne approached Mary, possibly making advances or simply trying to befriend her, Mary revealed that she too was a woman. This revelation led to a strong bond between the two women. They became comrades in arms, fighting side by side, their presence as effective female warriors, a truly unique spectacle in the pirate world. Mary Read, like Anne Bonny, was described by those captured by Rackham's crew as being just as ruthless and effective in battle as any male pirate. She wore men's clothes, particularly during action, and was proficient with both pistols and cutlasses. One captive, Dorothy Thomas, testified at their trial that Mary and Anne were more bloodthirsty and eager for action than many of the men. Mary's life had been a continuous performance of masculinity for survival and opportunity, and by this point, the skills and toughness she had developed were very real. She did not need a husband or male protector to fight her battles. She had been fighting them herself, in one guise or another, for most of her life. There is a story, recounted in Captain Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates, that while on Rackham's ship, Mary fell in love with one of the other pirates, a forced man or an artist Rackham had taken. When this man was challenged to a duel by another pirate, Mary, fearing for her lover's life, picked a fight with the challenger herself. She scheduled her own duel with him 2 hours before the one her lover was supposed to fight. In this duel, Mary fought fiercely, killing her opponent with her sword and a pistol shot, thus saving her lover without him ever having to face the danger. The story, if true, illustrates her courage and her protective instincts, but also her continued agency. She took matters into her own hands. Some accounts say she even married this man, according to pirate custom, though this would not have been a legally recognized union. Even if this brief marriage occurred, it was a partnership of equals on a pirate ship, far from any conventional societal expectation. Mary Read's piratical career, like Anne Bonny's, came to an abrupt end in October 1720 when Captain Jonathan Barnett attacked Rackham's sloop. As mentioned, Mary and Anne were reportedly two of the few who put up a fierce resistance, while most of the male crew cowered below. Their bravery was notable, but ultimately futile. Captured along with the rest of the crew, they were taken to Jamaica for trial. At their trial in November 1720, both Mary Read and Anne Bonny were found guilty of piracy and sentenced to death by hanging. Like Anne, Mary revealed she was pregnant, leading to a stay of execution. Tragically, Mary Read did not escape her fate for long. She died in prison in Spanish Town, Jamaica, in April 1721. Cause of her death is recorded as a fever, possibly related to childbirth, though this is not certain. She was around 36 years old. Mary Read's life was a remarkable journey of survival, courage, and defiance. From her early years, disguised as a boy, to her service as a soldier, and her final days as a feared pirate, she consistently chose paths that were closed to most women of her era. She proved that gender was no barrier to a life of adventure and combat, and that a woman could be a formidable figure on the high seas, entirely on her own terms, without relying on a husband for her identity, her protection, or her place in the world. Her story demonstrates an extraordinary level of independence from traditional spousal roles in achieving her legendary status. Number 2. Henry Every, the king of pirates who vanished with a fortune and became a legend. Henry Every, also known by aliases such as John Avery or Long Ben, was an English pirate whose spectacular success in the mid-1690s and subsequent clean getaway earned him legendary status, inspiring countless tales and even plays. His career was relatively short, but incredibly awful, and he achieved his notoriety and fortune without any mention of a spouse playing a role in his piratical endeavors. He was a leader who seized opportunity and then vanished, becoming a near mythical figure of the pirate who got away with it all. Every's early life is somewhat obscure, but he was likely born near Plymouth, England, around 1659. He appears to have been an experienced mariner from a young age, possibly serving in the Royal Navy and later on merchant ships, including slave ships. His defining moment came in 1694. He was serving as first mate aboard the Stede, a 46-gun warship that was part of a Spanish-backed expedition. The expedition was anchored at a Corunna, Spain, and the crew grew increasingly discontented due to months of unpaid wages and poor conditions. Henry Every saw his chance. On May 7, 1694, Every led a successful mutiny. He and his fellow mutineers seized the Stede, overpowering the officers. Every was immediately acclaimed captain by the mutinous crew. He renamed the ship the Fancy and set a course for a life of piracy. His leadership was apparently decisive from the outset. He was not a man who seemed to need a partner to affirm his decisions. He was a natural commander who inspired loyalty, or at least obedience, through his charisma and clear vision for acquiring wealth. Every announced his intention to sail to the Indian Ocean to plunder the rich shipping routes, particularly the lucrative Mu convoys that sailed annually between India and Mocha or Jeddah in the Red Sea, carrying Muslim pilgrims to Mecca and vast amounts of treasure. This was an audacious plan, requiring a long and dangerous voyage around the Cape of Good Hope. Under Every's command, the Fancy, a formidable warship, became a highly effective pirate vessel. Along the way, he raided French and Danish ships off the West African coast, adding to his resources and crew. His reputation began to grow. He was known for being fair to his men in the division of plunder, which helped maintain crew cohesion. The pinnacle of Henry Every's piratical career, and the event that cemented his legend, occurred in September 1695. After months of cruising the Indian Ocean, Every's Fancy, now sailing in a small flotilla with other pirate ships he had allied with, including one captained by Thomas II, who was killed in the ensuing battle, intercepted the annual Mughal treasure fleet. Their prime target was the Mughal Emperor, Aurangzeb's flagship, the Ganjai Sawai. This massive ship was reputed to be one of the richest vessels in the world, carrying not only wealthy pilgrims, but also an immense treasure of gold, silver, and jewels, valued at hundreds of thousands of pounds sterling, an astronomical sum at the time. The battle was fierce. The Ganjai Sawai was heavily armed and carried hundreds of guards. However, Every's pirates aboard the well-gunned Fancy were relentless. A lucky shot from the Fancy reportedly dismasted the Ganjai Sawai, and another shot caused one of its cannons to explode, causing chaos and demoralizing its defenders. After several hours of brutal fighting, the pirates boarded and overwhelmed the Indian vessel. Plunder was beyond their wildest dreams. Estimates of the value of the loot taken from the Ganjai Sawai and another captured ship, the Fateh Muhammad, ranged from £325,000 to £600,000. This included around 500,000 gold and silver pieces. Each ordinary pirate on Every's ship received a share worth more than a lifetime's wages for an honest sailor. Henry Every himself, as captain, took a captain's larger share, making him an incredibly wealthy man. Capture of the Ganges was not just a massive financial success. It was an international incident. The Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb was enraged by the attack, especially reports of the brutal treatment of the passengers, including women. He threatened to end all English trade in India unless the pirates were caught and punished. This put immense pressure on the English East India Company and the British government. A massive manhunt was launched for Henry Every and his crew, with a bounty of £500, later doubled to £1,000, placed on his head, a fortune in itself. This was one of the first worldwide manhunts in history. Despite the immense pressure and the global pursuit, Henry Every managed to elude capture. After dividing the spoils, he and his crew sailed the Fancy to New Providence in the Bahamas, which was then a relatively lawless outpost. They arrived in April 1696. To secure entry and protection, Every bribed the governor, Nicholas Trott, with gold, ivory, and even the Fancy itself. From here, many of Every's crew dispersed, some to the American colonies, others back to Britain or Ireland, hoping to blend in with their newfound wealth. There is no record of Every having a wife or family waiting for him, or one he acquired with his riches. His focus seemed to be entirely on his own survival and enjoyment of his plunder. What happened to Henry Every himself is the great mystery that fueled his legend. He effectively vanished. One of the most popular stories, romanticized in plays like The Successful Pirate, suggested he retired to a life of luxury. However, other accounts, notably in Captain Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates, paint a less glamorous picture. Johnson claimed that Every, attempting to sell his share of diamonds in England, was cheated by unscrupulous merchants in Bideford, Devon, and died in poverty, not being worth as much as would buy him a coffin. This version, however, is unconfirmed and might have been intended as a moralistic tale. Other rumors suggested he changed his name and lived quietly in Devon, or that he sailed away to found a pirate kingdom called Libertalia in Madagascar, though Libertalia is largely considered a fictional creation. The truth is, no one knows for sure what became of Henry Every. He was never caught, and his treasure was never fully recovered. His ability to orchestrate one of the largest pirate heists in history, command a loyal crew, and then disappear without a trace, all seemingly as a single unattached individual, made him the king of pirates or the arch-pirate in the popular imagination. He proved that one did not need a spouse for companionship or counsel to achieve immense success in the world of piracy, nor did one need such ties to execute a legendary vanishing act that has puzzled historians for centuries. His entire operation, from mutiny to millionaire pirate to mystery man, was a solo performance in terms of personal partnership. Number 1. Bartholomew Roberts. Meet Black Bart, the pirate who captured over 400 ships and had his own set of rules. Bartholomew Roberts, also known as Black Bart or Bart Roberts, stands as arguably the most successful pirate of the golden age of piracy, at least in terms of the sheer number of ships captured. Active from 1719 to 1722, this Welshman commanded a formidable pirate fleet and plundered vessels across the Atlantic, from the coasts of Africa to the Caribbean and Brazil. His story is remarkable not only for his success, but also for his transformation from a reluctant captive to a brilliant and disciplined pirate captain. All achieved without any indication of a spousal relationship influencing his command or his life at sea. Born John Roberts around 1682 in Little Newcastle, Pembrokeshire, Wales. He went to sea at a young age. By 1719, he was the third mate on a slave ship named the Princess, under Captain Abraham Plum. In June of that year, off Anomabu, on the Gold Coast of West Africa, the Princess was captured by pirates, led by Captain Howell Davis, another Welshman. Initially, Roberts was reportedly reluctant to join the pirates. He was about 37 years old at the time, an experienced sailor who had, until then, lived a life within the law. However, pirates often forced skilled mariners, particularly navigators and officers like Roberts, into their service. His reluctance did not last long. Perhaps he saw the potential for a different kind of life, one of greater freedom and wealth, albeit fraught with danger. Captain Howell Davis recognized Roberts's abilities and favored him. Just a few weeks after his capture, in a surprising turn of events, Captain Davis was ambushed and killed on the island of Principe. Pirate crew needed a new captain. Despite his short time among them, John Roberts was elected. It was a testament to his perceived leadership qualities. He reportedly accepted the captaincy, stating that since he had dipped his hands in muddy water and must be a pirate, it was better being a commander than a common man. It was around this time he adopted the name Bartholomew Roberts, perhaps to make a break with his past, or simply because it sounded more piratical. He also acquired the nickname Black Bart, though this may have been due to his dark complexion or dark hair, not necessarily a black beard like Blackbeard. Once in command, Roberts proved to be an exceptionally capable and daring leader. He was known for his flamboyant style. He often went into battle dressed in rich crimson damask waistcoat and breeches, a red feather in his hat with a gold chain and diamond cross around his neck, and 2 pairs of pistols slung across his chest on a silk sling. This image was far from the rough, unkempt pirate stereotype. He was also a strict disciplinarian. Roberts drafted a set of pirate articles, or a code of conduct, for his crew. These articles were quite detailed, covering everything from the fair division of plunder and compensation for injuries to rules against gambling for money, lights out at 8 p.m., and no women or boys allowed on board. He was also reportedly a teetotaler, preferring tea to alcohol, and he encouraged religious observance on Sundays, though this might be an exaggeration. These rules, unusual for a pirate ship, helped maintain order and efficiency within his large crews, and there was no mention of any allowances for spouses or partners. The ship was a self-contained, male-dominated world focused on piracy. Roberts' piratical career was astonishingly successful and wide-ranging. He terrorized shipping lanes for nearly 3 years. After avenging Captain Davis's death at Principe, he sailed to the coast of Brazil, where he captured numerous Portuguese ships, including a rich treasure ship in the Bahia de Todos os Santos, yielding a fortune in gold and jewels. He then moved to the Caribbean, capturing scores of vessels. At one point, he blockaded the port of Martinique because the governor had hanged some pirates. He famously designed a personal flag depicting himself standing on 2 skulls, one labeled Adge, a Barbadian's head, and the other Ange, a Martiniquean's head, signifying his contempt for the authorities of those islands. His success was due to his brilliant naval tactics, his courage in battle, and his ability to command large numbers of pirates, sometimes leading a flotilla of up to 4 well-armed ships. The total number of ships he captured is estimated to be over 400. This staggering figure makes him the most prolific pirate captain of the era. He was audacious and seemed to operate with a chilling efficiency, his actions unswayed by personal attachments ashore or on board beyond his loyalty to his crew and his adherence to his own code. He was, in essence, married to his piratical enterprise. Despite his success, or perhaps because of it, he became a prime target for the Royal Navy. The authorities were determined to end his reign of terror. The end for Black Bart came in February. His fleet was cruising off Cape Lopez in Gabon, West Africa. Captain Challenaire Ogle of the HM's Swallow, a powerful 50-gun man of war, had been hunting Roberts. Ogle cleverly disguised the Swallow as a merchant ship to lure the pirates out. Roberts's consort ship, the Great Ranger, engaged the Swallow and was captured. A few days later, on February 10, 1722, the Swallow encountered Roberts' flagship, the Royal Fortune. He had several ships of this name during his career. Roberts, dressed in his finest attire, initially thought the Swallow was the returning Great Ranger or a merchantman. When he realized it was a naval warship, he prepared for battle. During the engagement, Bartholomew Roberts was struck in the throat by grapeshot and killed instantly. He was 39 years old. His crew, devastated by the loss of their matic and seemingly invincible captain, and honoring his oft-stated wish not to be captured alive or dead, weighted his body with gold and jewels and threw him overboard. His body was never. With Roberts dead, his crew quickly lost heart and surrendered. Many were captured, tried at Cape Coast Castle, and hanged, marking one of the largest pirate trials and mass executions of the period. The death of Bartholomew Roberts is often considered a significant event, signaling the end of the golden age of piracy. He was the last of the great pirate captains of that era. His career demonstrated that exceptional leadership, discipline, and a fearless approach could lead to unparalleled success in the world of piracy, all without the need for a spouse to share the burdens of command or the spoils of victory. He was a solitary figure in terms of romantic partnership, entirely dedicated to his life as the sea's most formidable plunderer, a true ruler of his floating independent domain.